So today we're going to dive into some more advanced sound design tips. I've got 18 of them for you, so let's get stuck into it. So envelopes are really common modulators for things like amplitude and filter movement, but they're really good for other things too. So check out this sound here. It's pretty much just a sine wave and a square wave with a little bit of envelope modulating the filter, but I'm going to grab this same modulator and just try and modulate anything that might change the tone or the texture of the sound. So let's have a listen to this bend mount. You could also try something similar over here as well, but what I'm actually going to do in this case is actually modulate the level of this one over here. Another really cool thing to try is reverse envelope. So I'm going to reverse the envelope over here and now it's going to swell in. I really like the sound of that. Okay, so the next one is sample and hold, or in this case, we're going to be using velocity mapping. So if you look down here, I've loaded up this total random preset, which is a preset from the Velocity MIDI effect device in Ableton, and that's just going to randomize all of the velocity from any MIDI note that's played that comes into Serum. So if I just hit a whole bunch of notes, you can see in this velocity box, it's just completely random each time. And so this is creating randomization on a per note basis. So that's essentially what sample and hold does. So now we can use this velocity as a modulation source and actually modulate things to change every note. So that way we can create some really nice variation. So I've got this wavetable position. If I just scroll through it, this is what it looks like. And now every time I play a note, it's going to change what that sounds like. I'm going to do the same thing with this wavetable position. So you can hear that that note is changing each time, but better yet, if I play chords, then every note in each one of the chords is going to change as well. So like, sounds like this. If I play it again, it sounds slightly different. Modulate the cutoff value and sort of make that a bit different. So you can see that this has a huge amount of power when it comes to changing things every time you play a note or even a chord. So I want to show you this really cool thing to experiment with, which is playing the filter as opposed to playing the notes. So what I mean by this is if I go into the oscillator section and turn off the pitch tracking for both oscillators, that will make it so every single note in the piano roll is going to be the exact same. So it's not tracking the pitch anymore. So now I'm just going to choose a note that I like. So I just doubled up the oscillators and detuned them slightly. So now what I'm going to do is put the filter on, and I'm actually going to put the filter key tracking on, and that means that the filter is going to move as I play the notes. So now the fun part, I'm going to put the resonance up and I'm going to find and resonate on an A harmonic. So I'm going to try and find firstly this harmonic that I want. Let's just bump it up even more. That sounds like an A to me. So now we're essentially playing the filter. For example, if I play up a scale, by the way, if you want some good quality free Serum presets, go check out our Serum EDM Essentials in the description below. So EQ is usually used as a utility purpose, but you can use it creatively in sound design as well. So there's a whole bunch of cool EQ presets that you can sort of choose between, but let's say I just click this one. If I just bypass this first, I've got this pad. It really changes the tone of it. Maybe I can get another EQ and sort of just mess around with some bands as well. So I'm going to hit record here. You can also experiment with the different modes like mid-side and left and right mode as well. Experimenting with designing transients is cool as well. So I've got this sort of hat loop and I'm just going to layer it with just an operator preset. I just sort of picked this one, and I'm just going to shape the envelope a little bit for it to become a transient. So let's have a listen to this. So this is a really cool way to add like sort of different tones to your percussion and sort of get it hitting in a different spot. But you can sort of just experiment around with this as well. Maybe I can... This is going to add like a little bit of a metallic tone to my percussion. So designing your own transients is really cool for adding a little bit more punch to things like hats, snares, kicks, or any percussion sound, or you could even just experiment with it to the point where it becomes its own texture as well. I've sort of just added this like LFO tool with like a half rate and a sidechain shape, and I've got this sort of thing coming in, and it sort of adds a little bit to the groove, which is kind of nice. Experiment around with MIDI effects. You could do so many different things with MIDI effects. I've just got this little chord progression here. You could try things like arpeggiators and stack multiple arpeggiators on them and play around with the rate and see which weird effects you can get from that. Something that I like doing is just getting this random function. I'm going to put the choices down to 1 and put the random chance up. And I've just got the MIDI routing into this track, just in case we hit something that sounds interesting. So let's record. Oh, this little chord in here was kind of nice. Also, if you grab something like expression control, you can essentially map randomness to any knob, or any of these MIDI values over here to any knob. So I can just make any knob random. You can see it's changing around randomly. Record and sample yourself. It's really cool to, whilst you're sound designing over here, just like record all the audio into a separate track down here. How I've set this up is put the synth track into input monitoring, getting the input to be from this synth track from an audio track, hit record, and that way it just records the audio. So the next one is sidechaining things together that aren't just like a kick and bass line. I'm going to try sidechaining these two synths together and see what happens. So I've got synth 1 here, and I'm going to sidechain synth 2 to synth 1. Let's have a look here. So this synth just sounds like this. So it's giving it like a little bit of tail, right? So now I've flipped it the other way around, and I've got synth 2 being sidechained to synth 1. So this is just like essentially layering. We're just using this to layer these two sounds together so they sort of fit with each other and they interact with each other. So have a listen to this. That sounds pretty cool, right? So this is one of my favorite techniques, and it's using a gate sidechain this time. And so I've got a few notes sort of plugged in this organ sound here. I've also got this percussion loop here. Now, if I grab a gate and sidechain this audio to this gate, so you get the audio from this loop here, let's play this and have a listen to what's happening. So I can actually turn off this audio here and just use it as a trigger to create a rhythm in this. So now I can experiment around with the notes a little bit more. And now with a little bit of processing, a little bit of reverb and delay. There's some really interesting results you can make by combining tracks together by using sidechains. If you warp things really, really heavily, you can completely create something new and just change the result of what it sounds like entirely. So I have this sort of drum beat, which I made at 181, right? And I am going to put it onto warp mode and just drag the tempo down of my project all the way down, maybe like something like 90. And it's a really interesting thing that when you have some sort of breakbeat loop like this, you can create a hip hop break out of it by simply just warping it really, really slowly. So have a listen to this once I add a kick drum and sort of just like a Rhodes sample here. Play around with multiband parallel effects processing. This is a lot of fun to do. I'm just going to create a parallel band for this reverb device here. And then if I grab an EQ, I can just EQ out the specific frequencies which I want to be reverbed. So as I sweep this filter up, you can see that the frequencies in this region are going to be reverbed, but nothing else. So let's have a look at this. How cool is that? So noise is really good at thickening up bass sounds. So I've got this sub sound here that's pretty much just a sine wave with a little bit of distortion. And if I had to go grab an erosion device and put it onto the noise setting and just sort of add some noise peaks in there, so maybe just bring this width up a little bit. This already sounds so much fatter and so much thicker as well. This is a really good trick for bass lines. Experimenting with automation is really cool to try out as well. So in this track, I've got this sort of white noise hat here, and I'm just going to experiment with automating the decay knob by hand. I'm just going to hit record here and automate this decay knob. So let's give it a crack. So I'm literally just doing that with my mouse. There's so many different things as well that you can experiment with automation just to give your track a little bit more dynamics and feel. I'm just going to drag a utility onto the track now and automate by hand this balance knob or the pan knob, right? So let's have a go. And already with just a little bit of automation, it just makes this hat really pop. So I'm just trying to encourage you to get experimental and think about what parameters would be good to just randomly automate by hand, just dragging the knob up and down. You can also have fun with sort of dragging these little bars around and sort of playing with the automation that way. You can even flip the automation upside down like this. And of course you can insert shapes as well. So using resonators on sort of rhythmic things is a really cool way of working and creating some sounds as well. So I've just got this drum loop here. It's like a jungle drum loop that I've just chopped up and warped a little bit. And if I just put this resonator's default preset on, it sounds like this. And we can just change this note value to match our key, or this is our root note. Right? And then these pitch values allow you to generate a chord, right? You can use these gain controls to emphasize particular ones. And then I'm just going to get this dry wet and just turn it up to 100%. We also have a filter on here as well, which is pretty cool. So I'm just going to put this into a low pass. And maybe put some delay on it. And that's a nice rhythmic resonation effect. The spectral resonator is a really cool effect that you can use for melodic purposes as well. So I've got this little piano loop. And putting spectral resonator on. First thing I'm going to do is match the key of the note. So it's an F, right? I've been experimenting a bit with this granular setting over here. It sort of just chops up the audio into little bubbles. So I've just put the shift up and it just brings up the pitch of it. I'm going to put the pitch modulation up as well. Maybe a bit of unison. So now when I turn the dry wet all the way up, it just sounds like this, but it sounds really nice when you layer this with the actual original sound. So I bring the dry wet down. Beautiful. An awesome feature of Wavetable is that it allows you to import your own samples and use anything as a wavetable. Just create an oscillator out of anything, essentially. So I just got this sound that I just found. And I'm going to use this one because it has like a change in texture over time. That's kind of what I was looking for. And I just drag it into the oscillator section and now we've got this like really cool textural sound. And that's just the start or the basis of a sound that we can generate from, right? So you can do this with any sound and sort of just drag it straight from the browser into it as well. That's pretty cool. And so there's a lot of fun to be had just sort of importing random samples and using them as wavetables. Designing your own wavetables is sort of the next step up, and that's a lot of fun as well. So I've got this explosion snare here, right? I'm just gonna mess around with warping it, maybe like drag it, stretch it out a little bit. Maybe I'm gonna use the texture mode. Let's see. And that's sort of a nice like change over time. That's again what I'm looking for, just like a change over time so that scrolling through the wavetable gives you an interesting result. I'm just gonna consolidate this with Command J, and then I'm just going to drag it in over here again. That's pretty cool. So definitely experiment with designing wavetables, messing around, adding effects to things. And as a little last tip, I think that using percussion sounds generally works pretty well. So it's really easy to make pads or droning textures with anything by using Pulse Stretch. So Pulse Stretch is this guy. This is a free plugin which uses an algorithm that stretches the audio just into oblivion and essentially just turns anything into a drone. So whilst it is a plugin in your DAW, it's not actually linked to your DAW, so to speak. It just does its own thing within your DAW. So I'm just going to drag the audio sample into it and it's going to start playing. I'm just going to hit pause here. You can use the stretch amount over here to mess around with this. You can turn things on and off over here. This one's really buggy at the moment, but you can turn octaves up, stuff like this. And then you can simply just resample this track into another track and then use this to layer with things and just to have fun with and experiment with. So I'm just going to go in here and hit play and then just hit record. And now we have this sort of rich droning texture that we can experiment with. If you want to learn more about Pulse Stretch, I've got a section of another video. I'll link it at the top. It explains a bit more about it. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.